All Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
Welcome back, everybody, to Pit Pass. I'm Joe Williams, along with Larry Woody. Special thanks to Malcolm West for coming in. Larry, you get Malcolm in here. We didn't touch the number of stories that could be told.
Scratch the surface.
Yeah, but it's like you. If I can ever get you talking about some of the stuff, we need to just do a Larry Woody segment later.
We might do a book someday. We'll get Malcolm in, and then we'll get the lawyers. We'll have to get some lawyers,
we'll have to have the lawyers,
to proofread it.
We had a lot of fun. We said on the open, it's kind of a roller coaster, and it truly has been a roller coaster week. Earlier this week, we found that our old friend Joe Carver Sr. had passed away in North Carolina. Joe was a Nashville native, went to East High School, traveled the world with the U.S. Navy, and came back and went to work for Bill Donahoe and became one of the great PR directors that have ever graced a racetrack. Among the other things he'd done, he left here, went to Langley, Virginia, and got Langley Speedway back up and running, left there in '83 to come home, and brought with him the late model stock cars to Nashville, and did his best, Larry, to buffer with good management and good ideas the horribleness that was Warner Hodgson and his effect on this place. And then after that, went to work for Darrell and Darrell Waltrip, who he had kind of taken under his wings years before. Yeah. And spent the last few years as a show car manager, program manager for JKS Incorporated, and they are doing 30 or 40 show cars across the country. Larry, this is one of those folks that, while the entire world may not understand what Joe Carver did for racing, not only here but across the Southeast, he's one of those folks that was so instrumental but may never really have his name in a record book or an encyclopedia.
Well, first of all, Joe Carver, the Joe Carvers of the world made NASCAR. Yeah. You know, Joe, not individually our Joe Carver, but Joe and a relatively handful of people like him built NASCAR because they generated PR for the sport. They understood the importance of the media and the press. They worked as a liaison between the media and the press to get NASCAR publicity back in the old days when the media kind of turned its nose up. So again, without the Joe Carvers of his era, I don't think we'd have a NASCAR today. And when I got your email about Joe's death the other day, Joe just brought back a flood of memories because, as I told you then, Joe Carver was my mentor when I got stuck on the racing beat at Tennessee. And I told Bill, I said, he said, go out and interview a race driver. I said, Bill, I don't even know where the track is. He said, look up Joe Carver. He'll take care of you. And yeah. I did, and Joe took care of me for many years after that. He helped me through the sport. He introduced me to drivers. He explained which direction the cars were running on the track. And I would have been lost if it weren't for Carver. And he did that, Joe, as you know, for so many young people coming up through the ranks. He would take them under his wing, and he'd guide them through, and he's patient, and his understanding, had a great sense of humor. And it's people like that, Joe, and like our friend Malcolm West, that's what made racing so much fun back then. They were good people, and they were fun to work with, and Joe made the Nashville media want to come out and cover racing. You know, people that might not come out otherwise and cover it, Joe would call them, say, hey, we got a great story out here. We got some guy from North Carolina named Dale Earnhardt. Come out, he'd make you a good interview. And Joe went out and just beat the streets, wore out shoe leather, selling racing for the fairgrounds. And again, people like him, without that great grassroots work that Joe was so instrumental in, I don't think NASCAR would have ever got off the ground, certainly back in those days. And I think that foundation accounts for how popular it is today. And unfortunately, I think NASCAR's got away from a lot of that, and we don't have the Joe Carvers anymore, and that's part of NASCAR's problems. But what a great guy.
You wrote an outstanding piece for Racing Today. Yeah. Larry's still writing for RacingToday.com. It's a good place. It's Racing, RACINTODAY.com. After we emailed back and forth, you wrote a fantastic piece, and I like the part that the first race story you wrote
Joe Carver practically wrote it.
Dictated
Because I'm serious, I'd never been to a track back then. The first race I saw was kind of like Jerry Clower talking about the first football game he ever saw he played in. The first stock car race, the first race anything I ever saw, I was covering, you know. And Joe was at the fairgrounds, you know, as you said, PR director, general manager. He did everything for Bill Donahoe at those days. And Joe he introduced me to the drivers. He helped ask the questions that I didn't know to ask. And then when I sat in the press box typing my story up, Joe would stand over my shoulder and kind of make suggestions and that kind of thing. So basically, he wrote the first story that had my byline on it. It was actually written by Joe Carver.
Joe was about probably 6'6". Always appeared to be larger than life, was stark white-headed at probably 30. Big booming voice, just had this presence.
Always laughing and joking.
Always a smile, always laughing, always had a story or a joke. He, when he came back to Nashville in 1984, Larry, the track had struggled through some times of poor car counts, kind of familiar of what we've been through in the last few years, declining attendance and all that. And he brought with him the late model stock car division. And I remember because he hired me at the end of '83 to be the PR director. And there's another story there. But what I remember about it was he brought these cars in, and there were people who looked at him and said, "You're nuts, you'll fail, we will never build one of those." And his response was, "If you want to race here, this is what you will build." And you see what that division did over the next 5 years.
Yeah, Joe was really good he knew the racing, he knew the sport, he understood what works and what doesn't, and he transferred the same talent to Langley, as you know, the track there. I mean, he turned that into one of the premier tracks in the Southeast, I guess the entire country, but everywhere you'd go, you'd hear people talking around the circuit about what a great job Joe Carver's doing at Langley. You know, he's revived that track, he's brought it back, successful, big crowds and so forth, so the same talents that made him so good here in Nashville worked there, and of course, as you said, he served a stint as Darrell Waltrip's. I guess he's sort of a PR person. Joe always laughed. I once asked Carver, I said, "Joe, what exactly is your title with Darrell?" And he said, "Servant." Well,
if you remember, when Waltrip won the Daytona 500 finally, Joe calls me and he says, "Look, Darrell's coming in at this time at the airport. We're putting together, you know, folks to come meet him. You need to be there." And I said, well, you know, I mean, sure. I mean, I'll be there, but I don't understand. He said, "No, you need to be there." And I'm like, "Okay, why?" He said, "Because I asked you." And you know, that was enough to go, "Hey, I'm there. What time?"
And of course, the Joe Carver-Darrell Waltrip connection relationship goes back to the early years, because when Darrell came in from Owensboro, he had a lot of rough edges, as you know, and if anybody ever needed some PR work, buffing, Darrell Waltrip needed it, and Joe Carver was the guy who did a lot of that buffing and smoothed over some of Darrell's rough edges. And I think Joe taught Darrell, as Joe Carver taught me a lot of lessons about journalism, I think Joe Carver taught Darrell Waltrip a lot of lessons about PR and working with the media and being part of the media that Darrell still uses today as a commentator on Fox Sports. I think the Joe Carver influence lives on through Darrell Waltrip and through a lot of us, and I know through a lot of us older racing riders.
Well, I was blessed to work with Joe Carver, Gary Baker, and Bob Harmon. Bob and Joe sometimes didn't get along real well, and I'm convinced, Larry, it's because they were so much alike.
Yeah, they were, and it was a good relationship, though it wasn't an adversarial. You know, if somebody bounced an idea off somebody, I don't know if that'll work or not, they could sit down and work it out without they didn't come to blows or anything. And same way with Darrell. You know, Darrell could be difficult to work with, but Joe Carver was able to work with Darrell, and as I say, got him through some of these media mazes, and I think he was instrumental in Darrell's, particularly in the early career. Darrell was a fast learner, but Joe Carver was one of the guys that taught him some of those early lessons that, again, he still uses today, I think. And
I would not be surprised if it wasn't Carver who prompted him to be a little more outspoken than everybody else when Darrell started the being outspoken.
Joe understood the power of the press, and that it didn't hurt to stir the pot a little if it would get some media attention. He understood that the sport lives or dies with press coverage. If you don't get it, nobody's going to come out to watch the races if they don't know they're there. If you got some some loudmouth from Owensboro, Kentucky threatens to put Cuckoo Marlin over the wall the next race, then people like Darrell, then people may come out to see if Darrell Waltrip's going to put Cuckoo Marlin over the wall the next day. So, and Joe, again, there's nothing wrong with that. That was just the nature of the sport at the time. You needed some stories to sell to the media, to sell to the public, to sell tickets. Yeah. And Joe Carver did it better than anybody, as well as anybody I've ever known. Harmon was close, I guess. Humpy Wheeler was up there in that category, but you got to put Joe Carver somewhere in that top 4 or 5 of great racing promoters in that era.
And I think one of the guys who will take some cues from him will be Buddy Williams and the guys up at Highland Rim. And Buddy probably does a couple of things over at USA Motor and Machine. I know he built, but when Carver came in and started making some rules changes, Buddy came in and said, "Look, we're at USA Motor and Machine. We do this, we do this, we do that." And he kind of bought into it and went, "We can make those changes and we can do it inexpensively." And I think they all worked together some then. Carver. If there's a regret, it's funny that this came up this week, because if there's a regret, I was making notes last week, Larry, about people I wanted to get on as guests and maybe bringing them in through technology, etc. And he was like number 2, number 3 on that list. And
it's been great to have him.
I didn't make the phone call in time.
It's like one of our guests a while back, Russ Thompson. Joe Carver knows he knows about the history of the sport because he was there, yeah. And so nobody would be better. And that's one of those regrets. Obviously, you think about old friends. As I say, when I got your email about Joe, that they just brought a flood of emotions, and sat down thinking about the old days and the fun people. And again, like our buddy Malcolm West, that's what made racing so much fun. It wasn't just the cars running in circles on the racetrack. And frankly, I'm still not into that all that much. It's the people and the characters that you meet around racing that makes it so intriguing, and in the old days was so much fun to cover.
I will tell quickly the story that hit me when I got the news in '84. Started in 1984 when he came back. I'm 21 years old. I don't, but he hired me to do the media and the PR out at the fairgrounds, and we're having cup races and all this, and probably 3 weeks before the first race, on a Friday afternoon, we have a conversation, and he didn't seem unhappy, didn't seem happy. And as I'm leaving, his son, Joe Carver Jr., there are 3 Joes there at the time, which was a lot of fun, comes up and says, "Hey, Daddy told me to get your keys." And I went, "What, am I fired?" He said, "Apparently." Well, I spent the evening at Jesse Nash's shop going nuts. He fires me on Friday. I walk back in Monday morning. I'm waiting on him when he gets there. And I go in and explain to him he's made a huge mistake, and that he needs to change his mind. And I'm 21 years old, figured got nothing to lose. And he sat there. It's the only time I knew him to sit and just listen. He sat and listened for about 15 minutes. He said, "Son, you got more guts than I thought. Go back to work."
You won him over.
Yeah, it was, but that's just kind of the way it was. He was willing to listen.
Yeah. And can you imagine, Joe, I was thinking about this too. Bill Donahoe was one of my favorite people, but he was a cantankerous old guy, old school, yeah. Carried a pistol, yeah. paid drivers with cash through the pay windows with his pistol lying beside the stack of cash. He was not the easiest person to work with, and Joe Carver was able to work with Bill Donahoe. So
and succeed.
And succeed, do it well. He could work with anybody from Hope Hines down at Channel 5 doing some of those early racing shows to cantankerous old Bill Donahoe. He just had that personality where everybody liked Joe Carver, except for you briefly when he fired you. But but no, I'm serious.
48 hours, yeah.
Yeah, but I just, as you talk to people in those days, and even today, you just don't run across anybody who says, "Joe Carver, no, I never cared for that guy." Everybody liked Carver. That was just one of those qualities that you can't learn it or be trained for it. You're born with it, and that's what made Joe so good at his job. He just got along with everybody. He's a great liaison. If there's a problem, from the fairgrounds to Darrell Waltrip, peeving some media person, Joe Carver is always there to smooth things over, and keep the machine well oiled. He was as good as there's ever been.
Joe leaves behind his wife of over 30 years, Diana, his son Sam, Joe Jr., several other children. We do not, at this point, have details on when all the services will be. And of course, as this is posted, it could be within a day or two. Let us just say, no matter when the services are, that Joe Carver Sr. will be missed greatly and remembered more than fondly by racing communities across this country. That's going to do it this week for Pit Pass. Larry?
Quick show.
Been a fun one.
Enjoyable show. Some great old memories with Malcolm, fun memories, and maybe some melancholy memories about our buddy Joe Carver, but bittersweet.
But they're good ones.
All good. Yeah.
They're all good ones. We thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next time on Pit Pass.